The late afternoon sun hung low over Red Hollow, painting the sky in streaks of copper and blood orange. Dust swirled along the dirt road as the town gathered for the weekly auction, a ritual where ranchers and traders hawked horses, cattle, and the occasional piece of land. The air was thick with the scent of leather, gun oil, and stale beer. Somewhere nearby, a fiddle squeaked out a ragged tune, and the distant howl of a coyote echoed across the prairie. Cole McGraw leaned against the rough-hewn rail of the auction stand, broad shoulders silhouetted against the dying light. His boots were worn and scuffed, spurs glinting faintly when he shifted weight. He squinted at the chestnut stallion parading in the dirt ring, a fine creature, muscle rippling under a glossy coat, its mane whipping like fire in the wind. But Cole hesitated. The price was high, and the risk greater. A sudden voice broke his thoughts. "Don't buy the horse, buy me instead." Heads turned. The auctioneer stopped mid-sentence. Cole blinked. A woman, tall, flame-haired, and clad in dust-streaked boots and a faded skirt, strode into the ring with her chin lifted. Her voice was sharp, but carrying an edge of laughter, as if daring the whole town to take her seriously. Cole's jaw tightened. "You're serious?" he asked, stepping toward her, dust crunching beneath his boots. His voice was low, carrying over the murmurs of the crowd. "I'm serious as a rattlesnake in a camp kitchen," she replied, her green eyes flashing. "You want a horse that'll run you ragged and cost more than it's worth. Me? I'll be yours forever, no debt, no upkeep, and I work for love." A ripple of laughter rose in the crowd, but there was a hush under it, curiosity pulling at every soul gathered. The auctioneer coughed awkwardly. Cole studied her, not just her bold words, but the way her fingers tightened on her skirt, the fire in her gaze, the stubborn set of her shoulders. For a long moment, silence reigned. Then Cole's lips curled into something between a smirk and a frown. "You got guts, I'll give you that. But this ain't some storybook. The West don't deal in forever." She stepped closer, boots scuffing dirt. "Then maybe it's time someone did." The wind caught her hair, sending copper strands across her face, and Cole found himself staring longer than he intended. Somewhere beyond the ring, a coyote howled again, and the auctioneer cleared his throat. The deal, whatever it was, had begun. The saloon of Red Hollow was alive with clinking glasses, low laughter, and the creak of worn wooden floors. Lanterns cast pools of gold light across rough tables, and smoke curled in lazy spirals toward the low ceiling. Somewhere in the corner, a piano wheezed out a slow, bluesy tune, and the air smelled of whiskey, horse sweat, and the faint tang of gunpowder from the afternoon auction. Cole McGraw stepped inside, spurs jangling with each step. His boots hit the floor with a tired rhythm, eyes scanning the room until they landed on her. Clara Hayes sat alone at the bar, elbow propped, a half-empty glass of whiskey at her fingertips. Her fiery hair glimmered in the lantern light, and her green eyes lifted toward him with a mixture of challenge and amusement. "Fancy seeing you here, rancher," she said, her voice smooth, teasing. She swirled her glass, letting the amber liquid catch the light. Cole nodded, taking the seat beside her with the ease of a man used to claiming territory. "You make it sound like a surprise. You in town often, Clara?" His tone was casual, but his gaze lingered. "Only when trouble follows me," she said with a smirk. Her voice dropped, leaning closer so her words skimmed his ear. "And trouble seems to like you." A chuckle rose from Cole, low and dry. He ordered a drink, fingers brushing hers briefly. The touch was deliberate, a spark in itself. Around them, the saloon hummed, laughter, card games, the scrape of chairs, boots stomping in the dirt outside. A burly rancher at a nearby table sneered, eyes fixed on Clara. Cole noticed immediately. "Everything all right?" he asked quietly, his jaw tightening. Clara glanced over her shoulder, smirking despite herself. Just someone who thinks they own the place. She leaned in again, You'd think a man with your reputation wouldn't bother with small-town squabbles. Cole's grin was faint but dangerous. Reputation don't mean much when a fight's brewing. The saloon door swung open with a sudden crash, a gust of wind, and dust blowing inside. Cole's hand rested on his revolver, eyes scanning the room. Clara's laughter broke through the tension, light and daring. "You're all danger and no mercy, aren't you, rancher?" He tipped his hat at her. "Maybe, but I reckon we'll find out soon enough." Outside, the wind swept across the prairie. Somewhere in the distance, coyotes howled again, and inside the saloon, sparks of challenge, attraction, and trouble were beginning to catch fire. The morning came slow over Cole McGraw's ranch, the sun rising like molten gold above a sea of swaying prairie grass. Dust curled along the fences where horses grazed quietly, their tails flicking away flies. The scent of leather, hay, and sweat filled the air, and somewhere beyond the ridge, a hawk cried its lonely call. Clara Hayes stood at the barn, sleeves rolled high, fingers tugging at a rope. Her boots sank into dry earth, her skirt coated in dust. Cole watched her from the fence line, the sight of her working stirring something in him he didn't care to name. She glanced up and caught his gaze, a sly smile tugging at her lips. "Figured you'd be out here early," she said, her voice rough from work but edged with warmth. "You know I'm a hard worker." Cole gave a low chuckle, swinging himself over the fence. "Seems like you're trying to prove it." He moved toward her, boots crunching against the dry dirt. "Why'd you really come here, Clara? Don't usually see strangers throw themselves into a man's deal so boldly." She gave him a long look, wiping her hands on her skirt before answering. "Maybe I like a challenge. Or maybe I don't like being bought and sold like some horse." Her voice softened. "Either way, I've got a lot to prove." They worked side by side under the blazing sun, mending fences, tending the horses, hauling hay bales. The hours passed with unspoken tension between them, the kind that comes from shared labor and quiet glances. Their hands brushed over ropes and boards, and every touch seemed to carry something unspoken. By afternoon, sweat glistened on their skin, and the air was heavy with the scent of heat and dust. Cole leaned against the corral, watching Clara as she guided a stubborn colt back into the pen. Her hair clung to her neck in copper strands, and her green eyes were fixed on her task. "You've got grit, Clara," Cole said, his voice low, almost reluctant. She gave a half-smile, glancing toward him, "And you've got a way of seeing it." The sun began its slow descent, setting the prairie ablaze with orange and rose. The wind picked up, carrying the distant howl of a coyote. They stood close then, the silence between them thick with something neither dared name aloud. Cole shifted, his shadow stretching long across the dusty ground. "You ever think about why we're here?" he asked quietly. The dawn broke uneasy over Red Hollow, a pale light bleeding through ragged clouds. The ranch lay still under the hush of early morning. The only sound was the low creak of the windmill and the faint snort of horses in their stalls. Cole McGraw had been up long before the sun, boots pressed into dirt, checking fences and cattle. But something in the air felt different, heavier. Clara was already in the barn, brushing the chestnut stallion. They'd worked the day before. The quiet between them was easy until the sound came, distant hoofbeats, rapid and rough. Cole froze, hand dropping to the butt of his revolver. Clara stiffened too, her eyes narrowing. "They're coming," Cole said, no question in his voice. The first rider burst over the ridge. 3 men, guns drawn, dust trailing like smoke in their wake. Outlaws. Cole's jaw tightened. He moved before thinking, spurring his horse into the open. "Clara, get inside." But Clara stayed rooted. "Not without you." Cole swore under his breath. He spurred forward, the stallion pounding dry earth, gun drawn. Gunfire cracked across the prairie. sharp and angry, dust splintering around them. Clara ducked behind the corral, breath tight, eyes fixed on Cole as he fought to keep the outlaws at bay. Sparks of gun smoke curled into the air, and somewhere nearby a coyote howled its lonely warning cry. When the dust settled, 2 riders lay still in the dirt, and the third fled into the horizon. Cole's shirt was torn at the shoulder, dust caked on his face. Clara ran to him, boots kicking up grit. "You okay?" she asked, breathless. Her hand stayed on his arm, her touch lingering. Cole glanced at her, a flicker of something in his eyes. Gratitude, relief, something deeper. "Yeah," he said low. "Thanks to you." They walked back to the barn together, the silence heavy now. Clara's hand brushed against his, tentative. Inside, she leaned against the hay bale, her shoulders sagging. Cole studied her quietly before speaking. "Clara, why did they come for you?" She looked away, her jaw tightening. "Because of something I left behind. A promise I broke." Her voice cracked slightly. "I didn't want you caught in it." Cole's gaze softened, though the tension in his jaw remained. "You've been carrying that for a long time." She met his eyes then, green meeting steel. "Maybe I don't want to carry it alone anymore." The wind moaned outside the barn, rattling the door. Dust settled over them like a shroud. And for a moment, in the scent of gunpowder, hay, and sweat, they stood together, bound by more than fate, something fierce and unspoken stirring between them. Thunder rolled low over the ranch as storm clouds gathered above the horizon, blotting out the sun. The air smelled of rain and iron, thick and heavy. Inside the barn, the scent of hay mixed with sweat and the faint tang of gunpowder from yesterday's fight. Clara sat on a worn crate, shoulders hunched, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Outside, the wind rattled the wood, and distant lightning cast sharp shadows. Cole stepped in quietly, boots creaking on the floorboards. His shirt was damp with sweat from the day's work, his face drawn. He didn't speak at first, letting the silence stretch between them. Finally, he broke it. "You've been quiet since the fight." Clara glanced up at him, eyes tired but defiant. "I've been thinking about everything, about this bargain we made." She tapped her boot against the crate, the sound muffled by the storm outside. "I keep wondering if it's real, or if it was just desperation on my part." Cole leaned against the barn post, arms crossed. A bargain is just words until someone lives them. His voice was low, almost a rumble like the storm. "And you've been living it, but maybe not the way I thought." She looked at him, her gaze sharp yet vulnerable. "I didn't come here to be your possession, Cole. I came here to prove something to myself." She stood slowly, dusting her skirt. "I thought if I offered myself, you'd take me, but I see now that what I want isn't a bargain. It's trust." Cole stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. The stormlight flickered across his face, making his eyes seem like molten steel. "Trust isn't given in a deal. It's earned. And Clara, you've been earning it since you set foot on this ranch." Her breath hitched, and she looked away, biting her lip. Thunder cracked closer, rain spattering against the open barn door. He reached for her hand, brushing dust from her fingers. The contact was deliberate, grounding. "You scared me yesterday," he admitted quietly. "Not just a fight. You. I don't know if it's danger or pride, but you matter to me." Clara's eyes softened, and for the first time, she let her guard slip. "I'm scared too, Cole. But maybe we don't have to be afraid anymore." A flash of lightning lit the barn, followed by a roar of thunder. Outside, rain began to pour, washing the dust away, soaking the world in silver light. Cole took her hand fully, pulling her closer until they stood chest to chest. No bargain, no deal, just a quiet promise in the storm. The day broke quiet over Red Hollow. The storm of yesterday, leaving the prairie washed and glistening. Mist curled along the fences, and the air smelled of wet earth and wild sage. The ranch lay still, the only sounds a soft nickering of horses and the distant hum of the town waking. Cole McGraw rode out alone before breakfast, boots digging into the stirrups, dust still clinging to his coat. The corral was empty, save for Clara, standing at the fence in her boots and worn skirt, arms folded. Her fiery hair glowed in the morning light, strands still damp from the night's rain. "Morning," she called softly, her voice carrying across the quiet. Cole tipped his hat, a faint smile on his lips. "Morning, Clara." His horse shifted, restless. He studied her for a long moment. "You coming in today?" Clara stepped closer, boots crunching on wet gravel. "I'm coming, if you want me to." Her eyes met his, steady and unwavering. "We never finished a bargain." Cole shook his head, though a small smile tugged at his lips. "A bargain ended in the barn yesterday. What we got now, it ain't about deals." He dismounted, boots sinking slightly into the softened ground, and approached her slowly. The townsfolk began to gather in the dusty square later that afternoon, drawn by word of something unusual. Cole and Clara walked toward them together, side by side, spurs clinking softly. The saloon's doors creaked as they opened, and every eye turned to them. Whispering rose among the crowd. Cole stopped in the center of the square, Clara's hand resting in his. He took a deep breath, letting the words come slow, deliberate. "I don't care what tradition says. I don't care what people think." His voice carried, strong and steady over the murmurs. "Clara Hayes, you're not a bargain. You're not for sale. You're mine." Clara's eyes shimmered in the sunlight. She stepped closer, her voice trembling but certain. "And I'll be yours, Cole McGraw, forever." A hush fell over the crowd, the sound of a distant coyote howling cutting through the stillness. Somewhere, a piano in the saloon struck a chord, soft and haunting. The wind swept dust over the square, curling around their boots. Cole lifted her hand to his lips, brushing it with a kiss that was half promise, half possession. Around them, the townsfolk watched in silence, some smiling, others nodding in quiet approval. The sun sank low over the endless prairie, spilling molten gold across the horizon. Dust curled in slow spirals over the dry earth, and the scent of sagebrush rode the warm wind. Somewhere in the distance, the soft strains of the piano drifted from Red Hollow Saloon, mingling with the steady clip-clop of horses returning to their corrals. Cole McGraw and Clara Hayes stood at the crest of a ridge. The whole world stretched out before them, wild and endless. Their horses grazed quietly below, tails flicking in the evening air. Clara's fingers rested against Cole's weathered hand, callous but steady, their dust-darkened skin pressed together. Cole's eyes softened as he looked at her, the weight of everything they'd been through shining in his gaze. "Clara, I don't know how to say it right, but I'll try. You're my home. You've been my home since the moment you challenged me at the auction." Clara's lips curved into a quiet smile, her voice low but certain. "Then let's make it ours." He tipped his hat and leaned down, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Around them, the wind stirred, carrying the sound of coyotes calling to the night. The last light of the sun painted them in gold, and in that moment, with dust on their boots, love in their hearts, and the open prairie ahead, they knew they were exactly where they belonged. Cole tightened his grip on her hand. "Forever, Clara." She whispered back against the fading light, "Forever, rancher." They rode away together, the horizon swallowing them in a blaze of crimson wind and promise.